Hi there, Sarah here from Elmhurst College. I am sharing a little bit of a teaser for our webinar that's happening next Wednesday, April 1st at noon. So dial in for that. If you're here for the teaser now, we are going to be reading a little bit of an excerpt from The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Flamingo. So we're making a little PG today. This book is by Mark Manson. It's been on New York Times bestseller, gets a lot of attention. He has a second book out now, and we're going to use this to talk a little bit about mental and emotional readiness in terms of college. Okay, so to get started with the reading, I am on, just for your reference, page 76. So if you want to go back and look at this later, you're welcome to. I'm going to read the excerpt that we're going to be using for our discussion, and just, enjoy, sit back. I'm sure you haven't had someone read to you in a while, so it'll only take a few minutes here. Okay, rock star problems. In 1983, a talented young guitarist was kicked out of his band in the worst possible way. The band had just been signed a record deal, and they were about to record their first album. But a couple of days before recording began, the band showed the guitarist the door. No warning, no discussion, no dramatic blowout. They literally woke him up one day by handing him a bus ticket home. As he sat on the bus back to Los Angeles from New York, the guitarist kept asking himself, how did this happen? What did I do wrong? What will I do now? Record contracts didn't exactly fall to the sky, especially for rowdy, upstart metal bands. Has he missed his one and only shot? But by the time the bus hit LA, the guitarist had gotten over his self-pity and vowed to start a new band. He decided that his new band would be so successful that his old band would forever regret their decision. He would become so famous that they would be subjected to decades of seeing him on TV, hearing him on the radio, seeing posters of him in the streets, and pictures of him in magazines. They'd be flipping burgers somewhere, loading vans from their crappy club gigs, fat and drunk with their ugly wives, and he'd be rocking out in front of some stadium crowds live on television. He'd bathe in the tears of his betrayers, each tear wiped dry with a crisp, clean $100 bill. And so the guitarist worked as if he was possessed by a musical demon. He spent months recruiting the best musicians he could find, far better musicians than his previous bandmates. He wrote dozens of songs and practiced religiously. His seething anger fueled his ambition. Revenge became his muse. Within a couple of years, his new band had signed a record deal of their own. And a year after that, their first record would go gold. The guitarist's name was Dave Mustaine, and the new band he had formed was the legendary heavy metal band Megadeth. Megadeth would go on to sell over 25 million albums and tour the world many times over. Today, Mustaine is considered one of the most brilliant and influential musicians in the history of heavy metal music. Sounds like a pretty good outcome, right? Well, let's see. Unfortunately, the band he was kicked out of was Metallica, which had sold over 180 million albums worldwide. Metallica is considered by many to be one of the greatest rock bands of all time. And because of this, in a rare intimate interview in 2003, a tearful Mustaine admitted that he couldn't help but still consider himself a failure. Despite all that he had accomplished, in his mind, he would always be the guy who got kicked out of Metallica. We're apes. We think we're all sophisticated with our toaster ovens and designer footwear, but we're just a bunch of apes. Finely ornamented apes. And because we are apes, we instinctively measure ourselves against others and vie for status. The question is not whether we evaluate ourselves against others, rather the question is, by what standard do we measure ourselves? Dave Mustaine, whether he realized it or not, chose to measure himself by whether he was more successful and popular than Metallica. The experience of getting thrown out of his former band was so painful for him that he adopted success relative to Metallica as his metric by which to measure himself and his music career. Despite taking a horrible event in his life and making something positive out of it, as Mustaine did with Megadeth, his choice to hold on to Metallica's success as his life-defining metric continued to hurt him decades later. Despite all of the money and the fans and the accolades, he still considered himself a failure. Now, you and I may look at Dave Mustaine's situation and laugh. Here's this guy with millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of adoring fans, a career doing the only thing that he loves, and still he's getting all weepy-eyed that his rock star buddies from 20 years ago are way more famous than he is. This is because you and I have different values than Mustaine does, and we measure ourselves by different metrics. So, I guess the question is now, what metrics do we measure ourselves by? So definitely some things to think about, you guys. That's our teaser, that's our excerpt as far as what we are going to be talking about at our webinar this upcoming Wednesday, April 1st at noon. So check out the description below for the link to get access to that webinar, and come chat with me further about this as we gear up and prepare for the college transition and look at things like social, mental, and emotional readiness. All right, have a good weekend.